In the words of the legendary chef and my personal hero, Anthony Bourdain, food is everything we are. It's an extension of a nationalist feeling, ethnic feeling, your personal history, your province, your region, your tribe, your grandma. It's inseparable from those from the get-go. Welcome to Every Dish a Story, a podcast about a place of food in our lives and what it meant to our ancestors. I'm your host, Kat, and I'm going to take you to a new location every 2 weeks to connect to who we are. The exact origins of mac and cheese are unknown, although it most likely originated in Northern Europe, and the earliest known recipe was recorded in 1769. This cheesy dish came to the United States thanks to Thomas Jefferson, who, while visiting France, was fascinated by the fashionable pasta dishes served there. He brought back the recipes for pastas and a pasta-making machine, as these foods were unavailable in the colonies. After becoming president, he served mac and cheese at a state dinner in 1802. Kraft Foods introduced mac and cheese in boxes with powdered cheese in 1937, when America was going through the Great Depression. You could feed 4 people for 19 cents, and within a year the company sold 8 million boxes of its quick and easy macaroni and cheese. During World War II, when rationing was in effect, staples like fresh meat and milk were in short supply, so the boxed mix of macaroni and cheese continued to gain popularity. Now it's the standard incarnation of the dish, and along with ramen noodles, Kraft dinner, as it's called in Canada, is a staple of student cuisine. Some chefs nowadays are giving back to pasta, bringing inventive twists and turns to this classic and making it worthy of haute cuisine restaurants. Some restaurants, such as Smack in New York City, specialize in tantalizing variations of the dish, replacing the traditional cheddar-based sauce with brie, figs, rosemary, and mushrooms, for example. And while most restaurants, however, only have 1 or 2 options, in a place like DC, diners have a terrific variety to choose from, as the Washington Post confirms. And then there's Paula Deen, who wraps her macaroni and cheese in bacon, breads it, and then deep fries it. Although Thomas Jefferson is credited with bringing mac and cheese to America, it was the work of his enslaved cook, James Hemmings, that put the dish on the proverbial map and made it a truly famous American dish that it is today. In the eyes of Black people, mac and cheese is more than just a treat. It is a symbol of overcoming hardship, celebrating success, and a unifying force for families of all backgrounds. Well-cooked macaroni and cheese requires only a few additions and should not be too salty or peppery. There are different ways to make mac and cheese, and some try to make it prettier or more refined by adding truffle oil and butter, artisanal cheeses, or even breadcrumbs. But at the heart of this fairly simple and widely known culinary dish is cheese sauce and small pasta. Cheese and macaroni dishes date back to the royal kitchens of the 14th and 15th century Italy. In many cases, cookbooks have helped historians trace the origins of these dishes by providing information about the ingredients, cooking methods, and locations. A recipe for the lasagnas, which refers to a sheet noodle cut into 5 centimeter squares and sprinkled with grated cheese, can be found in the Liber de Coquina, a medieval cookbook written in Latin in the early 14th century. Many historians believe that the Liber de Coquina was the first printed recipe to include cheese and macaroni, and thus set the standard for the future recipes with identical ingredients. Forme of Curie, England's oldest cookbook, features a recipe for macaroons, a dish that is very lasagna-like. It instructs to cut a thin piece of pastry dough into smaller pieces and boil them in water. After that, the chef is instructed to take grated cheese and melted butter and arrange all of this in layers, and then serve. As a reference to noble cuisine during the late 14th century, this cookbook and its related recipes served as a valuable resource for royal homes across Europe, and it is still in use today. Now, fast forward about 400 years to the late 1780s, when Thomas Jefferson was introduced to macaroni and cheese on a trip to Europe. Historians continue to debate exactly where Jefferson first encountered the dish, in Paris or Italy, but nevertheless, Jefferson was very intrigued by it. At that time, wealthy Americans who traveled across the pond fell in love with dishes from first bite and sought to emulate the continental way of life. So Jefferson drew sketches of pasta, took detailed notes on its extrusion, and even sent a pasta extruder back to Virginia so he could use it. And that's how mac and cheese first appeared in the south of the United States. Mac and cheese is without a doubt one of the most popular convenience foods in the United States. Thanks to its easy preparation, simple ingredients, and terrific taste, mac and cheese has become a staple in the average family's home, making its way onto the dinner table on regular days and special occasions. The dish is especially popular in the southern states, and in African American communities, it has become a sacred and unifying food. One of the stories, however, remains untold when discussing American cuisine: the role of the enslaved Africans and their descendants in shaping the way Americans eat. Going back to Jefferson, and when he visited Europe in the 1780s, he first encountered this dish and fell in love with it. He later hosted mac and cheese dinners, receiving rave reviews, and the rest is the kind of American story but told by white men. However, it was not Jefferson who cooked the dish, but his slave and cook, James Hemmings, who was able to warm the hearts and fill the stomachs of the former president's guests. James Hemmings was a chef trained in Paris, but he was born into slavery and lived most of his life as a slave. At the age of 30, he secured legal release from slavery and began the life of a free man. He traveled and polished his craft as a chef, but unfortunately his career and free life were short-lived due to his tragic and untimely death at the age of 36. He gave the world mac and cheese and was the first American to train in the culinary arts in France. In the late 18th century, in Monticello, James Hemmings served as Thomas Jefferson's valet, chauffeur, and cook. On Jefferson's orders, in the spring of 1783, Hemmings was trained by a French chef in Annapolis, which was followed by even more training by a chef at Chateau de Chantilly, the five-star restaurant of 18th century France. At the Jefferson Palace in Paris, after completing his culinary education, he led a huge French-speaking team to prepare Jefferson's fine dishes for royalty and the most discerning guests in Paris. He was then appointed head chef. Hemmings revolutionized colonial cuisine by introducing continental European-style macaroni and cheese when he returned to Monticello as a slave. Sadly, historians don't know how exactly Hemmings prepared the macaroni and cheese for Jefferson's guests. Although it is fair to say that although African Americans largely created the world-famous food at Monticello, they were invisible to those who sat at the table, as Thomas Jefferson once said himself. According to Damon Lee Fowler, in his book Dinner at Monticello in Good Taste and Abundance, enslaved black people were taught to follow written recipes, but they were also talented cooks in their own rights, and like today, added their own touches beyond the text. You see, their hands knew different foods, their noses knew different aromas, and that couldn't help but affect cooking for the better, Fowler writes. And while Hemmings learned from a French chef when he spent time in Europe with Jefferson, it was his own way of cooking macaroni and cheese that was Jefferson's favorite. Hemmings was able to gain his freedom by teaching another slave, his own brother Peter, how to make Jefferson's favorite cheesy dish. Peter Hemmings cooked a casserole macaroni and cheese at state dinners hosted by Jefferson in the 1800s, thus furthering the introduction of the dish to America's upper classes. Mac and cheese made its way into the cookbooks and became the culinary delight among the wealthy, but it was also a dish for the poor. After the abolition of slavery, the black community often relied on aid organizations and food from the government, which often included macaroni and powdered cheese, making for a quick, easy, and inexpensive meal. As black Americans became wealthier and had access to more food from stores and markets, roux, a heat-treated mixture of flour and fat, usually melted butter, and other tricks were added to macaroni and cheese, passed down from generation to generation to this day. Macaroni and cheese is part of the journey of the Black American. It is not just a favorite American dish, but truly a staple for Black people because, as in case of James Hemmings, it provided an opportunity for freedom, was a way to express culinary creativity, at times served as means of survival, and to this day is a way to bring people together at the dinner table and beyond. It's interesting to note that a lot of deliciousness has sailed across the Atlantic back and became firmly embedded in the psyche of the Brits. No one in Britain today can imagine the world without mouth-watering pulled pork, cinnamon buns, or chocolate brownies or blondies. And one of the best dishes, of course, is mac and cheese. And although it is considered a largely American dish, mac and cheese has its origins in Britain as well. Mac and cheese emigrated to the United States and Canada with the British settlers. But it wasn't until the 1930s, during the Great Depression, that it really became a part of American culture. Millions of people were starving, but one enterprising salesman in St. Louis, Missouri, came up with the idea of combining not-perishable dry macaroni with dry cheese. This could be produced en masse and at a low price. It was a huge success. It quickly became the best friend of the American housewife and could feed a family of 4 for just 19 cents. It literally saved the nation from starvation. And it was British immigrants from different regions of the British Empire who introduced macaroni and cheese to Canada. Modern Practical Cookery, a book published in 1845, contains a macaroni and cheese recipe that calls for a puff pastry lining, suggesting upper-class refinement, and a cream sauce with mace and mustard, and a sprinkle of grated Parmesan or Cheshire cheese on top. Canadian cheddar cheese was also becoming increasingly popular at this time. In today's Canada, mac and cheese is a very popular dish. Kraft Dinner is the most widely distributed brand of macaroni and cheese in a box. According to Sasha Chapman, who was writing in The Walrus, it is Canada's national cuisine, surpassing even poutine. In fact, Canadians account for over a quarter of the 7 million boxes of Kraft Dinner sold worldwide each week, according to Nielsen data. The first mention of macaroni and cheese on the British side of the Atlantic can be found in Elizabeth Raffles' 1769 classic cookbook, The Experienced English Housewife. In Elise Acton's Modern Cookery for Private Families, published in 1845, macaroni with velouté sauce appear. Velouté is prepared on the basis of golden roux and light chicken or veal broth, and is one of the 5 mother sauces of French cuisine. Then the classic bechamel sauce also appears and is also one of the 5 mother sauces. Cheddar, Parmesan, Gruyere, and Blue Stilton are just some of the cheeses included in these dishes. For African American communities, holiday food is inextricably linked to soul food, meaning that macaroni and cheese is a year-round unifying dish. Macaroni and cheese in Black culture has become the centerpiece of any family gathering due to the fact that it's prepared as a casserole. Overall, the evolution of macaroni and cheese is something like this. It began as a royal food in Northern Europe, then it crossed over the Atlantic Ocean as an elitist dish, and when it finally arrived, the enslaved Africans who cooked the dish had a huge influence on its preparation and taste. Thus, in turn, led to its cultural and culinary significance in American culture today. And before I wrap up this dive into mac and cheese, here's a few interesting factoids for you. Kraft, the undisputed king of the global macaroni and cheese game, sells more than 1 million boxes of mac and cheese every day and has expanded its macaroni and cheese product line to include 24 different varieties. There are 16 products in the blue box range. This is the conventional variety that you boil in water. There are also 16 various kinds of microwavable cups to choose from, as well as 10 deluxe options. As a dish usually associated with children and college students, mac and cheese doesn't really conjure up ideas of fine wine and other adult beverages. However, there are many various levels of quality when it comes to this cherished dish. If you're enjoying a homemade baked mac and cheese with high-quality ingredients, award-winning food and wine writer Fiona Beckett recommends combining it with Chardonnay, dry Riesling, Saint-Emilion, dry cider, traditional English ale, champagne, among other options. It is very important to choose the right type of pasta. A reason why purists swear by little elbow macaroni and shell macaroni is that these two forms of pasta have just the correct amount of surface area for the cheese to adhere while still being chewy. Long, thin strands of pasta such as spaghetti or linguine are unable to withstand the amount of cheese that is thrown their way and are better suited for sauces such as tomato and Alfredo. English word macaroni actually is derived from the Italian word macaroni, yet it didn't actually originate in Italy. The Italians took the name Maccaria from the Greek language, which literally means a meal made with barley. And of course, mac and cheese has its own Guinness World Record. A macaroni and cheese dish made by John Foles, an American chef, and the Cabo Creamery Cooperative set a Guinness record on September 23rd, 2010, for the world's largest macaroni and cheese dish. A total of 2,469 pounds of pasta, 286 pounds of mixed cheese, 56 pounds of butter, 26 pounds of flour, 1,100 pounds of milk, and 61 pounds of dried spice went into making it. The cast iron pot in which this dish was cooked in alone weighed a whopping 1,900 pounds. Well, that's it for now. Thank you so much for your attention. Continue to eat well, train hard, and love cats. And please recycle your garbage when you can. Wherever you are in the world, I hope that you are healthy and that you are safe. Bye-bye for now, and I'll be back on April the 21st with another journey.